Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a pickups video. I don't really have a ton of pickups, but I've basically picked up a few things here and there going back to sort of January now, and I've been sort of really cutting back on what I've been buying in to move my focus a little bit to reading and rereading what I have in the sort of library as it kind of stands, and that way I can enjoy what I've already paid out into things rather than just constantly adding to that to be read pile. So grab yourself a drink guys, get comfy, and let's do this. So I guess this has been a little bit of a sort of two-tiered approach where I've cut back on my buying quite heavily. What I would have bought in a month, I've probably bought now in this little sort of stack here in about 6 months, so that is a significant reduction overall. But the second thing I've done is I've tried to focus my purchases on things that I'll definitely enjoy, the things that I pick up first off of the shelf to read, and just generally things that I'm gonna get that value back out of sooner rather than later, and are not just gonna sit there and add to be read pile. Because I know that for me, building a to be read pile is not actually the intention of the hobby, but and I know that we both just add to that pile and spend half the hobby time building a pile of comics that we never touch. So what I've been doing is trying to bring that down, and anything that I bring in, I don't want to be adding to that. I want to be reading fairly quickly. So as I go through these, I've probably read about half of what's in this stack since I picked it up, because I've just been so enthusiastic and so sort of pumped to get into those books, and those are the books that I'm enjoying kind of going through. So first up then, talking about books that I really enjoy, I've been upgrading Vagabond to these new deluxe editions. I forget what the exact term is that they use for them. They call them, I think it's definitive or something like that. But these are really nice built, sewn binding with ribbons and all that kind of stuff. Deluxe hardcovers, which will hopefully last a lot longer than the Viz Bigs that I had before. And they're just a really nice kind of finish overall. I would say that I personally have a bit of a niggle of how they've gone about this sort of half sort of sleeve on the bottom, because for me personally, I really liked the sort of conjoining spines that they had in the art from the Viz Bigs. And if you do decide to keep these sort of sleeves on, they don't actually join up the art. It's just kind of a little bit of a continuation of the picture from the front. So that's a little bit disappointing, to be honest, because it doesn't really add anything now when you've got a whole bunch of books on the shelf. You're just going to see these little tail bits of kind of pictures. Alternatively, I'll just pop this little sleeve off. You can leave them with the book spine itself without the kind of sleeve on it, and they've done these sort of old school Japanese, I don't know what you'd kind of call it, like sort of tapestry print designs. And each book has a slightly different colour and slightly different pattern. So you'll have all these different kind of old school patterns going along, and then the tops all kind of join up with the various kind of numbers and things. So provided that the height lines up, and you're not going to end up with these up and down sort of a sort of staircase style as they kind of sit along the shelf, then that would actually be the better choice, I think, in the long run. But then, what do you do with these? Because I am that guy who would, tear this stuff up if I'm keeping the book long term and don't care. But I feel like this is kind of important to the book, so Do you stash these somewhere? Do you put them in a drawer? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you've picked up these books. What you do? Do you leave this sort of sleeve on and just put up with the weird sort of half picture on the spine? Or have you tossed this away? You know, what do you do? So this is the second one, and it's got this sort of blue design underneath it. And again, you can see there's just a slight bleed around to the spine. And then the third one here has a more sort of golden brown, and there's almost no bleed around the spine. So yeah, I don't know. Continuing on with manga, I picked up the third volume of The Valiant Must Fall. Now, it's been a little while since I've read the last two volumes of this, and again, maybe I'm tight, but I've been holding off because I don't want to be spending £15–16 on a manga volume. They're relatively expensive. But this showed up on Amazon the other day for, I want to say, like £8 or something like that. And that's a lot more reasonable to me. Basically, the premise of this book, if I remember correctly, was that there was a young samurai type character that was trying to commit suicide, but gets pulled into the basically charge of this young sort of noble girl who also somewhat wants to die, but she's immortal until her mum dies, who is also immortal. So there's this weird tag of, I don't know, it's not really suicide so much as like a planned death. It's kind of weird. Anyway, there is a sword involved that can actually allow these immortal women to die, but the mum has to die first, if I remember correctly, and basically that is our sort of journey. So the first volume is essentially them meeting up, the second volume is them kind of heading towards wherever her mum stays, I believe. I'm not really sure what happens in this one, but I think there's maybe 4 or 5 of these out so far. And I am still looking to pick up the other ones, but as I said, I just don't want to be spending £17 on a manga trade. The last manga that I've picked up is Kaiju number 8, and this is actually volume 8. I've really been enjoying this, and I absolutely power through it super fast. Like, I could read 2 or 3 of these in an afternoon, and because of that, I tend to kind of wait and buy them in a bit of a chunk so that I can enjoy that sort of arc or so, rather than sort of flying through one volume each maybe month and then not really recalling what happened last because I went through it so quickly. But I do also enjoy rereading through them, so when I did pick up this volume, I reread the previous sort of 2 volumes relatively quickly, and then went into this one to sort of continue through. For those who aren't aware, Kaiju number 8 is basically about a defence force in Japan that fights against the appearances of various kaiju creatures that appear. Over the years, the creatures have got stronger and stronger sort of elements about them, and the teams have had to get better and smarter and stronger at how they kind of fight back. They use parts of the various dead kaiju that they've killed to make weapons, armour, other things like that, which allow the humans to kind of somewhat meet them on their level. And Kaiju number 8 is the first human to basically be outright infected by a kaiju, and he can somewhat transform between human form and kaiju form completely, therefore not really requiring weapons or things like that because he can essentially meet them on their own kind of terms. It's an interesting story about sort of like family and how friends and family kind of connect and challenge each other, and they're always pushing each other forward. There's sort of elements that you would get from sort of My Hero Academia, where there's always like one character that's struggling to kind of keep up and kind of push themselves, you know, plus ultra to that next kind of level and stuff like that. But it's just a real fun book and a real fun story, I find. Only downside I would probably say is that because it is a fast action, packed kind of book, occasionally you'll get a few panels that to my eye just kind of look like a blur, and I have to kind of just let it go and move on because I just can't make out what's happening. But it never really lasts more than a panel or two, and it doesn't really take away from my enjoyment of the book. So this is volume 8, volume 9, 10, 11, and 12. I have read 8 and 9 out of this stack, but my next read will probably take me through the rest because, as I said, I've been reading this super quick, and then I'll have to look at picking up some more. Next up, we have the Power Rangers Recharged. I have been, again, somewhat waiting through eBay searches and things like that to pick these volumes up because they're only getting more and more and more expensive on their sort of recommended retail price. I think the last volume that's just been announced is sort of like £65-70 as its sort of RRP, which is absolutely mental for a deluxe hardcover, especially when most of these, a third of the book is just covers in the back, which is not comic to me and doesn't add to the value in my opinion. So I managed to pick this one up from a sort of book reseller on eBay, and they were selling it for, I want to say, around £30-35. And it was brand new, so I don't know who traded it into them. It was literally in shrink wrap when it turned up. So on my shelf, I basically have the original run of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which is the Mighty Morphin stuff. So it's Mighty Morphin Volume 1, 2 and Shattered Grid, I think. And then they did a Beyond the Grid, which in my opinion was a whole bunch of weird like stuff that the writers wanted to push their own sort of agendas on and create weird teams, and I don't know what they were trying to do. It didn't really fit the story. So I read that and moved on, which was extremely disappointing to me because that book was the one that had the Ranger Slayer on the cover, and she's one of my favourite characters in this sort of overall story. But anyway, I cleared that one out. So after those kind of arcs, the main writers from the first 3 volumes, Kyle Higgins, had kind of left, and as I said, we had a little bit of stumbling with the Beyond the Grid, trying to figure out who was going to take over writing, and then I believe Parrot, if ever you say it, and the main writer that's written the Go-Go books basically took over the entire thing. With one writer going forward, it means everything connects a lot more, and what they've done with the deluxe hardcovers is that they have collected both volumes simultaneously, so you'll have, say, 5 issues or 10 issues of the Mighty Morphin and 5 issues or 10 issues of the Power Rangers, both in the same physical book, and it basically flows as one overall story, because it's essentially 2 teams that are in our modern age now, rather than a team in the past and a team in the future. So it all connects up a lot better and flows a lot better, in my opinion. I've got the first 2 volumes of that, but I'm waiting to pick up the 3rd one for less than £40 because, as I said, I don't really condone and I don't really want to spend these higher prices on the deluxe hardcovers, especially when they seem to be getting thinner, and as I said, they've got a fair chunk normally of just art in the back, which is not actual comic. The only other thing I would mention is, with this being a newer sort of event book, they have given it this sort of foil red section in the middle of the spine, which means that we have yet another change to the spines on the shelf. So hopefully the last one is either the same foil or a similar foil to this for the last one, and we don't just have a completely new design again, because I know a lot of us are a little bit picky about how our shelves kind of look. But yeah, they keep changing that up. It's a bit of a pain sometimes. Just to wrap up on this book before we move on, I really enjoy the most recent arc. It delved into a lot of characters that don't really get backstory in the TV show, so we get kind of origins of Zordon and Lord Zed and Rita, and we pull them right into essentially sort of modern day and have them react and sort of fight off each other's and stuff like that based on these origins, and it just gives them a lot more sort of like grit and meaning in this universe, which we didn't really have in the TV show, where everything kind of focused around just the main 5 rangers at the time. So I've been really enjoying just seeing much more depth in these characters, and I'm interested to see where that all kind of goes. Off the back of reading a book called Outlaws, I believe, which I really enjoyed by, well, it's not by Cinebook, but it was translated by Cinebook. I found out, this is going back a while now, that there was an original book called Orbital that it basically spun out of. And I really, really enjoyed Outlaws because despite it being a bit of a overall sci-fi world with some of the sort of politics and things in there, the characters were kind of like rebels and doing their own thing, and it was, you know, a bit of kind of like pushback against the system and, you know, all this kind of stuff, which really kind of like gets you hyped and going and having a fun time. Orbital for me feels a little bit the opposite. It feels a little bit slow, a little bit politicky. I'd say a lot politicky, let's be fair. And I'm just not enjoying it on the same level. Anything that seems to build up and could cause any drama, the focus of our main characters is to quell that drama rather than be in it. And it just doesn't seem to have that same fun, grit, pacedness that the Outlaws book did for me personally. So I have picked up, this is volumes 3 and 4, and I have read these volumes, and it kind of gets into a bit of backstory of both of the characters, how they got into their various positions, what happened in their past, and one of them sort of was in politics and kind of left that side of things, and they have a lot of tension between each other. I just don't know if it's for me going forward. There's another 4 volumes of this, and it's really well drawn, it's really well written, it's not a bad comic, but it just doesn't feel fun. You know, I feel like I'm watching the big politics scenes in a Star Wars movie and I'm not watching the Jedi, you know? Like, it's just not really the fun parts for me. So what I'd like to know, again, putting it out to you guys, is in the comments below, let me know if you've read this complete run, and if you have, is it worth reading the complete, you know, full thing? You know, is it worth me investing in the next 4 volumes of this? Because I really feel like even though the writers and the overall art are of a high quality, it's just not a story that's connecting with me. You know, I'm not a politician. I don't really care about this kind of stuff on this kind of level. And if our main characters don't end up going rogue by the end of this, I'm really going to probably be quite bored. So without spoiling anything, let me know if it's worth continuing. You know, if I'm missing something, if they're building up to something, you know, as I said, without kind of spoilers, because I'd really love to know why this went on to 8 volumes when it seems to be dragging a little bit. On a much more positive note, Birthright finally has deluxe hardcovers. And I love Birthright. Birthright to me is like Klaus taken to a whole other level, thrown into sort of sci-fi fantasy worlds of Dungeons and Dragons, but at the same time you've got a little bit of, I guess, that sort of like Brubaker cop, try to solve a mystery type thing going on at home. We're kind of going between two worlds. The art is really cool and it's just a real fun book. This is by Joshua Williamson, and he's one of my favourite writers when it comes to independent sort of books. He does some really fun, interesting, just from a completely wild sort of tangent sometimes style stories, and I'm all for it. Like, I picked up, we have where are they? Nail Biters behind me in deluxe hardcover, and I think those were the first books that got collected in that way, and it's just a really, really fun story. I think I've got another book somewhere, I think it was like Ghosted or something like that. That one was one of his first books and wasn't quite as crazy, but again, it was still quite a wild book about kidnapping ghosts or something, if I remember correctly. And then I believe the run that he's just finished is Dark Ride, which we've actually got up on the shelf over there. Emma's just picked that up, and I'm looking forward to getting into that at some point as well, and hopefully that'll get some sort of deluxe edition down the line. So I just really, really enjoy these stories overall, and they're just absolutely crazy. You have this as a sort of police drama, sort of classic looking kind of stuff going on sometimes, and then you work up to it being all sorts of kind of magics and sort of fantasy things, and then at certain points, these characters are essentially godlike in their kind of powers and various kind of things going on. But it's just a real fun, quick read as well. It's not one of those books where you're going to get, half the panel is some sort of narration trying to explain things that they're not going to show you. This book shows, it lets itself be a comic book, and it only really puts the text in there for what they want to say at any sort of given moment, and everything else is basically shown to you on the page. It does have elements of sort of King Arthur lore type stuff in there. There is those kind of British folklore type, ties to sort of things, but it's not really a clone of those stories. It's very much its own thing about this young boy who goes missing one day in a forest, and one side of the story is the mum basically blaming the dad and the sort of police investigation and drama on that side of things, of what kind of happens to the family. And the other side of things is his story in that fantasy world and his fighting of essentially inevitability. Every time that he gets more powerful or more able to take on the bad, evil element of this world, he slowly becomes the next bad, evil element of this world. And essentially, he's fighting against himself and against human nature, and it's a really interesting topic, which, even though the book resolves, doesn't really get to resolve in your brain, because it's got this constant kind of loop thing going on of, you know, can you ever take out bad without becoming bad, I guess, in a way? Like, it's interesting. It's a very interesting book. There should be 2 volumes, so this is the first one. And it was a pretty decent price. I want to say again about £30–35 for this. There's no wasted space, you know, for, you know, a whole bunch of stuff in the back. You've got maybe, you know, I don't know, this much, if that, that's sort of like back art. So it's a very good use of, you know, space within the books itself, and a really good value, I found, overall. So I can't wait to get back in and reread this. I'll probably wait until the second volume comes out, tail end of the year, to kind of do so that I can read it all through in one kind of go. Being able to see it with the oversized art, with the sewn binding that will lay out flat and things, I just can't wait to, you know, delve back into this worlds, wherever you want to kind of put it as. So last up, and this one has probably been the longest one kind of waiting in my lists, and that is Sonic the Hedgehog, the IDW collection, volume 5. So these, again, when they come out, are solicited at some stupid price like £50, and, you know, they're really thin. Like, if you compare them to the sort of Birthright book, it's probably about half the content, and it isn't really justified. I know it's licensed, I know it's a big, you know, thing, but that's not really justified. This, to me, is Saturday morning TV. It's a bit of fun. It's watching, you know, the Turtles or the Power Rangers, as you'll have got the theme from, you know, a lot of this sort of stuff. I quite enjoy those kind of overall stories, that they live in their worlds and tell their tales, and they're not, you know, tying themselves to our current reality, time, politics, any of that stuff. It's escapism. It's a bit of fun. And yeah, so I've been waiting to pick this up, and I think I got this from Speedy Hen, if I remember correctly, for around, again, let's just say £30–35, which is probably a little bit more than I'd want to spend on a thin deluxe hardcover, but in today's market, it's probably as cheap as you're gonna get them. So I'm looking forward to getting into this. I really enjoy the run overall so far. We've got this character here who was trying to kind of replace Robotnik's kind of role within things, when in a volume or so back, again, it's been a little while since I read this, a volume or so back, there was a bit of an arc where he becomes good and doesn't know that he was kind of bad, so this bad character is trying to kind of take his place and connects with these sort of 5 or 6 sort of demon type characters to manipulate them to take on Sonic and his kind of cronies. And Sonic has just figured out that one of the characters that he's just met and made friends with was actually created by Robotnik while he was in this sort of good state, if you like, and they're, I guess, somewhat wondering if she'll ever go bad, if I remember correctly. That's kind of where we left things off. So I'm looking forward to get into this next arc. I do believe they release one of these roughly once a year, so you're not having to be in a huge hurry and, you know, pick it up every 2–3 months, like, you know, those deluxes of Vagabond. They're coming out maybe every sort of like 3 months or so, so there's like 4 of them in a year, which is quite a lot of money to put out, you know, if you're not wanting to spend a lot. But this is like a 1 a year thing, so it's not a huge commitment to jump into. It collects any and all of the sort of side issues, specials, anything like that as well that's going on at the time, similar to what the TMNT ones do. And it's just, yeah, it's just a fun little palette cleanser from the other maybe slightly darker, slightly deeper lores that you might kind of read on a daily basis. And I love the Saturday morning TV kind of element of it. You know, like I'm coming up for 40, but I still enjoy this stuff. Like I don't care. Like if you find a book fun, then read it. Like it doesn't matter how childish or child aimed that book is. You know, you do you as far as I'm concerned. And this is one that I highly recommend checking out if you have even a passing interest in Sonic and Sonic's lore. So that's everything as far as what I've picked up over the last, let's say, ballpark 6-month period. I might have missed something here and there, but that's the general kind of gist. As I said, I probably read roughly half of this, and now that I've done this video and reminded myself, I'll probably rattle through most of the rest of this in the next month or two, apart from the Power Rangers one, which I need to pick up a volume in between before I can kind of do that. Let me know below though if these are series that you guys enjoy. I'd also love to know if there's any series that you guys buy and read straight away. Like what book, if you got tomorrow, would you immediately read? You know, it kind of would skip to the top of your kind of to be read pile and never get to kind of sit in that kind of backlogs, because that's the kind of comics that I want to talk about. That's the kind of comics that I want to be reading and enjoying, is the ones that I'm compelled to come back to or read, you know, continuing on the story from the previous kind of volume, and not the ones that somebody's like hyping up I don't really care about, and then they just sit there for months and months and months and months and years, and it's like, why? Like if you don't care, hype is pointless, you know? So let me know in the comments what your favourite comic, manga, anything that you enjoy that you would jump straight into as soon as getting the next volume. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time.